Ingles.fm, Real English Conversations, Series 1. Podcast 10, Crime and Corruption, Crimen y Corrupción. Este podcast contiene una conversación real y sin guión entre dos hablantes nativos de inglés, Mark y Tom. Oirás primero la conversación y a continuación una clase de inglés con explicaciones en español. Cada podcast viene con un workbook detallado que puedes descargar desde nuestra página web, ingles.fm. Incluye una transcripción completa de la conversación, listas de vocabulario, notas culturales y la clase. Recuerda que los miembros de nuestra lista de distribución reciben gratis transcripciones extra de nuestros podcasts, además de muchas otras cosas gratis. Así que no olvides apuntarte al consultar la página. ¡Buena suerte!
Hi, my name's Mark, and I'm here with Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
We're here again in Parc Turó in Barcelona, just off Avenida Diagonal. And today we're going to talk about crime and corruption in London and Barcelona.
Fabulous.
Well, we all know that crime can occur anywhere, but normally the statistics are higher for large cities, especially cities with high numbers of tourists and foreign visitors. And we have an interesting statistic about Europe and European cities. Do you know the European city with the highest rate of petty crime and pickpocketing?
I do actually, because I've looked up the statistic. It's actually where we are now, Barcelona.
Which is quite sad, but not as bad as it seems. Because the pickpocketing here, as everyone who lives here knows, is a problem. It mainly occurs in the areas you'd expect, where there's high concentrations of tourists. So around the cathedral, the Ramblas, Sagrada Familia.
But it's petty crime, isn't it? It's called street crime or petty crime. It's not like serious violent crime here in Barcelona.
It's never normally violent at all. What normally happens is someone will run past and swipe a handbag, or someone will realize when they go to pay for a meal that their wallet isn't in their pocket, or mobile phones taken from tables outside cafes.
Yeah, no, this is something I had an experience very recently. The night that Spain won the World Cup, I went to Plaza Catalunya, and within 3 minutes somebody had their hand in my pocket, and they were trying to take my wallet, but I put my wallet in my bag and zipped it up.
Very wise.
So that's my first experience here, but I'm very, very careful because I've travelled quite a lot and through Latin America, so I'm very careful with my things, but I'm still, I'm quite worried walking around Barcelona sometimes in certain areas if I have a camera or my audio recording equipment and so on.
Again, because the camera would probably make you look like a tourist rather than the resident you are.
Yeah, exactly. So how does Barcelona compare to London? I think our listeners would be interested in, hearing about London.
Well, in London, the general crime rate is much lower. However...
What do you mean, general crime rate?
Well, the general street crime and petty crime rate is lower in London compared to Barcelona. But, generally, the attacks or the incidents are more violent in London. So, for example, rather than being pickpocketed here, you will be mugged, which normally would either involve threats of or actual violence, and then you would have your possessions taken.
Yeah, they might use a knife more often, for example, in London.
Normally to threaten you, so you would give over your possessions without a struggle, but often people have been stabbed if they have resisted, so it's a lot more frightening in London.
And have you been mugged in London?
I have when I was at school. I used to have a Sony Walkman, and because I went to a private school that was next door to a comprehensive school, the pupils at my school were natural victims for the pupils at the other school. So muggings and other after-school fights were very common. We were easily identifiable because of our school uniforms.
Yeah, I don't think in 12 years in London I didn't get mugged or pickpocketed, but I did get attacked by a gang of young African Caribbean people once and beaten up when I was with you.
Yes, that was quite a scary night, but Luckily, it was very quick and they ran away, so we got off lightly, I think.
So knife and gun crime is a little bit more prevalent in London, isn't it?
Yes. For example, this year, up until early July, 13 teenagers were stabbed in London, which is the same as the entire total for 2009. So we can see that young people are more likely to carry knives and use them in London. And similar to the United States, they have introduced metal detectors in schools. The police have powers to stop and search people they suspect of carrying knives, all in an effort to prevent more unnecessary deaths between young people.
But it's mainly, it's quite sad statistic, but it's actually mainly young black people in London, in the African Caribbean areas like South London, where we used to live, and New Cross and Peckham, and in sort of East London as well, isn't it, mainly? And the teenagers are carrying knives around from the age of 12, 13 years old, and, you know, they get in their 12 or 13-year-old fights, as people do at that age, but instead of just hitting each other like they used to when we were young, you know, now somebody has a knife and they're trying to prove their, you know, their
manhood or something.
Exactly, yeah. And so, you know, it's become an increasing problem over the last few years. And also gun crime.
Gun crime is on the increase a lot. A lot of it is gang-related, drug-related in the inner cities, especially in London, with many of the young people modelling themselves on established gangs. So with a large Jamaican population, for example, or a population from the Caribbean, many youngsters, teenagers are modelling themselves on the Yardies, the Jamaican criminal gangs who control most of the drugs trade in London.
Yeah, and when we lived together in Brixton in South London, I remember there was a period for about a year where every day there was a new sign up somewhere about a shooting, and the police put these notices up on the road asking for witnesses, and every week, or every day, every week, you know, frequently there were new signs up. And actually my ex-girlfriend got caught in a shooting incident in Brixton, and she was in a car that got between two gangs, and they shot her car 7 times, and her friend were okay, but she was so frightened after this incident she left London, and she now doesn't live in London anymore.
I think that would be enough to make me leave.
Yeah, so moving on, organised crime. What can you tell us about organised crime?
Well, we have a bit of a connection here, because with the rise in gun crime and the modelling of young people on established Jamaican gangs, they are organised and control vast networks, as I've mentioned, drugs, but also in the importation of illegal guns into the country. But as with the rest of Europe, there are big problems with Russian and Eastern European mafias, also controlling drugs from the East and being involved in prostitution.
Yeah, they smuggle in, there's a lot of Eastern European young girls being smuggled in and then set up in these sort of brothels, aren't they, where they have to work as prostitutes. It's very sad, for many years to pay off, you know, the fee of coming over. You know, the costs of being smuggled in.
And Spain is one of the favoured destinations, because prostitution is not illegal in Spain, but in England it is.
I didn't know that.
So there are many brothels, and also driving into and out of the city, you will see many scantily clad young women standing at the side of the road, by truck stops, by little tables and chairs, under umbrellas, waiting for passing motorists, and most of them look as if they are from Eastern Europe. We also have a problem with the Chinese triad gangs, who again are more concerned with people smuggling, but for work. So they would supply illegal labour to companies, ostensibly fruit picking, seasonal labour, and provide very low cost employment, and get huge profits from the owners of companies, who would pay them rather than paying the going rate for Spanish workers. So organised crime operates at many different levels in Spain.
And of course we've got the traditional English criminal gangs who through history have escaped England and gone and lived on the Costa del Sol.
Costa del Crime, as it was called.
Yeah. So it's quite famous in England for being a place that English criminals escape to with their proceeds from armed robberies and bank robberies and so on.
That's becoming less and less now because of the integration of the European Union, bigger cooperation between police forces. It's not as bad as it used to be.
So touching briefly on corruption, what's the difference between crime and corruption?
Well, there is a question. Is corruption not a crime until you get caught?
Yeah, well, corruption is everywhere, and of
Yeah.
course it's not a crime because people, you know, it's hidden
Yeah.
by definition, really.
On every level of society, but mainly politicians in Spain have been very famous recently for being arrested in corruption trials, for taking kickbacks, financial gifts from property developers to give them access to land on which to build flats and hotels, office blocks. And recently 2 high-profile cases have come to light where the ex-mayor of Marbella has been arrested on charges for having received over €1 million in a very short period of time. And a small town where I know some people who are originally from there, the ex-mayor recently was arrested for fraud on similar charges, but ironically he was the mayor at the time. He conducted the civil wedding service of 2 friends of mine last
Oh,
year.
my word. Yeah, and of course I lived in Thailand, and the whole society is built on corruption, but it's kind of overt corruption. It's obvious, it's accepted part of everyday life. You know, the police get paid very little. They have to raise money for their own uniforms, their own guns, their own motorbikes, so they stop people and fine them for not having helmets, for things like that, when they need the money, usually at the end of the month when their salaries run out. So it's accepted as part and parcel of life. And in somewhere like England, there is still corruption. You know, in what kind of forms of corruption are there in England?
So in England it's more insidious. It's almost part of the social fabric. A lot of things happen with corporations getting favourable tax breaks because of maybe the old school tie, the old boys network. CEOs of powerful companies have personal social connections with certain MPs. There were cash for questions, where leading questions would be asked by members of Parliament in the House of Commons in return for money from people who stood to benefit from a favourable outcome of these questions.
So in conclusion, every country has its fair share of crime and corruption. It just operates on different levels, some more overt than others, and it's part and parcel of human nature, I think, isn't it, and capitalism. Anyway, thanks for joining us. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Hola, soy Rosario. Y como la conversación de hoy ha sido sobre delitos, os vamos a enseñar todo el vocabulario y expresiones más comunes en inglés para hablar de robar y de robos. En inglés, el verbo to steal es el verbo más genérico y significa, de manera muy general, coger algo sin permiso. La persona que lo hace es a thief. Por ejemplo,
A car thief steals cars. Thieves often steal from tourists. Last week a thief stole my bicycle.
el siguiente verbo, to rob, se parece mucho a la palabra en español, pero en inglés se usa por lo general para querer decir quitarle algo a alguien o a algo, a menudo con violencia o amenazas. La persona que lo hace es a robber. Por ejemplo,
Bank robbers rob banks. Someone with a knife just robbed me.
en Inglaterra el verbo to mug es muy habitual para describir un robo en la calle, que siempre implica violencia o amenazas de violencia. A mugger es la persona que comete este delito, conocido como a mugging. Por ejemplo,
Several people are mugged in Manchester every day. The mugger used his knife to mug me. Muggings are the most common street crimes in London.
el verbo to burgle quiere decir entrar ilegalmente a un edificio y robar. La persona que lo haga es a burglar. Por ejemplo,
Flats are burgled every day in Barcelona. A gang of burglars stole all our office computers last night.
Otra forma de decir to burgle es to break in. Aquí tenéis un ejemplo.
Burglars often break into empty houses.
Por último, os vamos a enseñar dos expresiones coloquiales muy habituales. Primero, to rip someone off, que significa hacer que alguien pague más de lo que vale por algo. Por ejemplo,
In most cities, people try to rip off tourists. I was ripped off by the taxi driver coming from the airport.
el segundo verbo coloquial es to nick. Es una manera muy común para decir, en general, coger algo sin permiso. Por ejemplo,
My friend always nicks pens from his office. I had my phone nicked on the metro last week. We hope you found this useful, and no one nicks your MP3 player, so you can join us again on next week's podcast.
Gracias por acompañarnos con este podcast de Ingles.fm. Recuerda que el webbook contiene una transcripción completa de la conversación, listas de vocabulario, notas culturales y la clase. Lo puedes descargar de forma instantánea desde Ingles.fm. Nos vemos.